Happy Monday, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are listening to me from around the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's teaching. I am Krista Bontrager. I am a public theologian and Christian apologist, and this is the channel where I offer teaching about the Bible and theological commentary on social issues. Now, I'm still hard at work on my dissertation. I'm trying to start the second half of my journey on that. And please, I would really appreciate your prayers and that I can finish this up as quickly as possible, hopefully by the end of the year, so that Monique and I can start writing the next book. I hope that in the meantime, you are enjoying our current release, Walking in Unity. I would love to hear your comments and feedback about that project. In the meantime, I am still trying to bring you some occasional podcast content so that you don't think I've stopped podcasting or fallen off the face of the earth. I do realize that these topics have been fairly random, and that's just the nature of things right now as I'm working on my dissertation. So I really do appreciate your patience with me. Today, I'm going to bring you a teaching that I did recently at the Orange County Rescue Mission. If you are new to the ministry, you might not be familiar with their work. We've had their president, Brian Crane, on our All the Things podcast to talk about homelessness in the past. He's a friend of the ministry, and we have done some trainings for their staff at the mission. And for 4.5 years, I helped to run the monthly question-answer time on Bible and theology at the mission, because many people who come to the rescue mission are discovering the Christian faith for the first time, or they're rediscovering the faith of their childhood, and they have a lot of questions. And so in this message, you're going to hear me address the residents at the rescue mission. And one of the most common questions I used to get when I would do the Q&A times each month was, why are there so many different versions of the Bible? So I tried to put together a basic teaching to address this question for them. And I made a little recording of it, and Bob's put it together. I hope you enjoy it, and we'll share this with a friend. And with that, here is my presentation. Why are there so many versions of the Bible?
Please welcome Krista Bontrager.
All right. Well, it's good to be back. It's been a couple of years since I've been here. I helped lead the Monday night discussion group for 4.5 years. And then in 2022, when I started my doctoral program, that was when my friend Ryan Pauly took over, and I'm sure he's doing a wonderful job in fielding all of the very fine questions that the students bring. And tonight I'm going to talk about one of the most common questions I used to get when I would run the Monday night discussion group. And so I thought it would be fun to just talk through and give a whole presentation about this topic, because it was such a common question that would come up. And that is the question, why are there so many versions of the Bible? If you've ever tried to buy a Bible and you go into the bookstore, there's a lot of options. And it's hard to know what am I even looking at here? There's just this wall of books, and they all say the Holy Bible, and what's the differences between them? So we're going to try to unravel that a little bit tonight in this presentation, and then we'll have some time for Q&A afterward. So how do we get to a good translation down here? This is sort of the funnel of ideally we end up with a good translation down here at the bottom. That's the end goal. Well, it takes a lot of ingredients to get through that funnel. And one is you got to know the original languages. The Bible was not written in English. It was written in 3 different ancient languages: Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. And so if you're going to have a good Bible translation, you've got to have some kind of mastery of those original languages, not just the English language. But then you also have to have a mastery of the reader's language. So if you're translating the Bible from Hebrew into English, you also have to have a mastery of English. Or if you're going from Hebrew to Spanish, you're going to have a mastery of both of those languages. Finally, it really helps if you have a qualified team of scholars, not just one person. You want to have some people that you can talk through that have these credentials up here at the top, that you can help each other, because there are some parts of the Bible that are, quite frankly, a little challenging to understand. And it helps if you have a team of scholars, each with different expertise, that can help bring their expertise to different books of the Bible or different sections of the Bible. Some people specialize in the Old Testament. Some people might specialize in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which is a section of the New Testament. So it helps if you have a team. And then ideally you get through the funnel and out pops a good translation. Ideally, this is how this works, okay? So how do we do this? Well, we first analyze the original language. And again, the Bible is not written in English. It's written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. And then we transfer that meaning into the reader's language, which in our case might be English or Spanish or something like that. And then we try to structure the original meaning into a way that readers can understand. And we're going to go through a couple of different approaches. It's not so simple as just saying this word means this, and you just translate it for word. Sometimes, as we know in our language, there's slang. If I say that the topic of abortion is a hot potato, there's no amount of study on the word potato that's going to help you understand that sentence, because the phrase hot potato is slang. And so sometimes there is slang in the Bible that has to be translated so that it makes sense to the audience that's going to read it. So it's quite a complex process, but I'm just giving you kind of a little overview here. And so now we're going to look at an overview of what I call translation families. Those of you who are in a family, you know that you have distinctive features of your family. Your special family traditions, how you celebrate birthdays together, or your language that you speak when you're in the home, or even your own family inside jokes, right? Families have distinctive features, and different Bible translations are like that. They have different features. So I'm going to describe 4 different families or types of Bible translations. First, we're going to look at what I'm going to call literal translations. Okay? These are word-for-word translations of the original text. And the primary concern with these types of translations is that of accuracy. So if there's a one-on-one correspondence of a word, we just go from what this word means in the original language to this is what it means in English or Spanish. It's just word for word. So in the case of slang or idioms, they might not explain what the idiom or the slang is. They would just translate it word for word. And then the reader sometimes is like, well, I'm not familiar with this culture. I don't know what this slang means. But it's a word for word translation. So examples of this, if you go to the bookstore and you see all of this alphabet soup of letters, the NASB, the ESV, NET, NRSV, KJV, It's just this alphabet soup of abbreviations of different types of Bibles, okay? And I'm going to give you at the very end what my recommendations are, so you don't have to remember all these. But what I'm going to just want you to be aware of is that this is one translation family. These are word-for-word translations. The New American Standard Bible, NASB, or the English Standard Version, ESV. These are what are called word-for-word translations. Secondly, are called dynamic translations. These are thought-for-thought translations. So sometimes they don't translate particular words, but they're trying to get the gist of the thought across. And so this is where something like a word play or a slang, they might say, well, this language I'm translating it into wouldn't necessarily understand this slang word, but I'm going to translate the thought behind it. And so these are called dynamic translations. And here the primary concern is that of readability. It's not so choppy as the word-for-word translations. It's a lot smoother in how it translates the Bible, and it'll put it more in modern-day language and to explain the thoughts behind it. So again, these are dynamic translations. This is another family. So here's some more abbreviations for you. The New International Version. Anyone ever heard of that one? It's a very popular one. The New Living Translation is a newer translation. It's a good one. And the Christian Standard Bible, the CSB, it's a very new translation. And the New Living Translation is probably the one that is most in our common language. It's very, very accessible to people, especially if the Bible is new for you. That's a good one to think about. Okay, the third family of translations is that of what's called free translations. And what we mean by free is that this is really in the common language of the people. This might not even totally consult to the original languages at times. It might be more focused on the reader's language and to really try to get it accessible. So this might even be a children's Bible that abbreviates stories. The New International Reader's Version, it uses second or third grade vocabulary. So this is often a translation that's used if English is your second language and you're just learning. This is a good one to start with. The Good News Bible is one that was around when I was a kid. It's for the older people in the room, if anyone lived through the hippie generation, that was one that was very popular back in the 1970s. And the Contemporary English Version is another good one that is very simple in its language. Finally, we have paraphrase. Paraphrase Bibles are not actually translations. They just take a pre-existing English Bible and then simplify it. They don't make any effort to look at the original languages. Has anyone ever heard of the Living Bible? Yeah, this would be an example of a paraphrase. It takes a pre-existing English Bible and then simplifies that language. Or the Message by Eugene Peterson is another example of a paraphrase. So again, these are different families of Bibles. So I'm trying to create a roadmap for you so that you can recognize how some of these different translations are different from one another. So here we have, on closest to me, again, this is just a review of what we've said, is we have word-for-word translations, the NASB, the New American Standard, English Standard Version. Anyone ever heard of the King James Version? That's kind of the old standard. That would be in this family of the word for word, or the New King James. Then we have thought for thought, or dynamic equivalence. Here it's called functional equivalence. This would be the New International Version, Christian Standard Bible, New Living Translation. And on the far side would be the paraphrase, okay? So think of these as a spectrum. They're all the same Bible. It's just trying to figure out how to communicate the Bible to us as the reader in the most accurate or understandable way. And that is the great tension in Bible translation. This is the one thing that you need to understand of how these are all different, and that is accuracy versus readability. Some Bible translations are very easy to understand. They're heavier on the spectrum of readability. Others, like the word-for-word translations, they are heavier on the accuracy. They want to do a one-to-one correspondence between the original language and the reader's language. This is what makes Bible translation so challenging, because sometimes language changes over time. And has anyone tried to read the King James Bible? It's a little challenging. It's written in what's called Elizabethan English. It's the English of Shakespeare. We don't really talk that way anymore. And so there is some vocabulary in the King James Bible that has changed. But it's not that the Bible has changed, it's that we, the readers, have changed and our language has developed. And so as the reader's language changes, the translators of the Bible work on the words so that it is in the common language of the readers. But back in the 1600s, that is how the regular people spoke. That they understood Elizabethan English. If you're a Shakespeare major in college, you probably can read the King James Version, no problem. Others of us struggle. So here's just one example. This is from the book of Job, chapter 36, verse 33. It says in the King James Version, the noise thereof sheweth concerning it, the cattle also concerning vapor. I don't know what that means. The NIV, the 1984 version of the NIV, translates it this way. His thunder announces the coming storm, even the cattle make known its approach. Okay, now that I understand. So did the original language underneath it change? Did the Hebrew change? No. Our English language changed. The readers here in North America, we changed. Language develops and evolves over time. And so that's a lot of what Bible translators are trying to do, is that they are trying to take those original languages and put it in the language of the people who are living today. I want to take a quick time out here so that we can hear from our friends at Birmingham Theological Seminary.
If you want to know the worth of a seminary, go take a look at their graduates. Our graduates are all over the world. They're planting churches, they're revitalizing churches, they're translating the Bible, they're starting discipleship movements. It's heart-shaking, life-changing, and just mind-expanding of what God is doing.
You know, sometimes I really do have to pinch myself that what I get to do with the ministries at BTS, the engaging with the students and the impact that God uses us to have on the lives of our students, it's a pleasure, it's an honor, and it's a joy.
Jesus is still building his church. So we need to equip the pastor teachers who equip the saints. We need to equip the elders who shepherd the church. And I am grateful that Birmingham Theological Seminary is available to be a part of the expansion of the kingdom of God in these very crucial days.
And once again, I want to encourage you to maybe check out the work at Birmingham Theological Seminary, see if it might be a good fit for you as a very cost-effective way to continue your theological training. And with that, we'll get back to the teaching. Why are there so many versions of the Bible? Sometimes translation involves scholars fine-tuning their understanding of the ancient language or manuscripts. Here's an example of that. In the 1984 version of the New International version of the Bible, it translates this very famous passage about Jesus' birth as being that Mary and Joseph placed him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. Now, we take this word inn, and we extrapolate a lot from that. You know, if our kids are in a Christmas show, we got to have the innkeeper, the innkeeper's wife. It's a hotel. There's a no vacancy sign, right? All of these things are stemming from this word picture in our mind over the translator's use of the word inn. Over time, the translators felt like it was a better translation as more archaeological discoveries were being made, that really it should be translated, there was no room for them in the guest room. Well, that paints quite a different picture about the location, doesn't it? Now they're not in a hotel anymore, they're in a house. And there's probably other relatives in the house. And as archaeologists have studied more about first century dwellings, especially in the area where Jesus was born, translators had made this little adjustment. So there is a different word for inn that's used also in Luke chapter 10, verse 34. If you've ever heard of the story of the Good Samaritan, and the Samaritan stops, he stops and he says, you know, he's trying to bandage up the man's wounds, and where does he take him? To an inn. It's a different word than is in Luke chapter 2. So that was another reason behind the translators deciding to change this word. In fact, the Luke chapter 2, it is the same word that's used in Luke chapter 22 for guest room. If you remember Jesus during the Last Supper, what does he do? He goes to the upper room, the guest room. This is the same word. So there's some reasons behind this little change, but sometimes these decisions that translators make is to bring more precision and accuracy to the text. Now again, did the Greek change underneath? No. What changed was the English translation in trying to make it more faithful to their best understanding of the original language. Accuracy versus readability also comes in here. This one is very tricky. Is sometimes translations involve interpretations. For example, this Greek word sarx means flesh. So if I'm going to translate it in a word-for-word way, I say in John's gospel that Jesus came in the flesh. Well, we kind of know, that means he became a human being. But most in the word-for-word translations, they say, no, we're just going to keep it flesh, because that's what it literally means in Greek. And so we're going to keep that word-for-word translation. And it has a very positive connotation in John's gospel, that Jesus came in the flesh, because this is how he identifies with us as human beings. But in Paul's letters, flesh has a very negative connotation, where Paul says over and over again, to put to death the deeds of the flesh. It's the same word. It's sarx. Well, what does that mean exactly? To put to death the deeds of the flesh. Well, it's different than what it means that Jesus came in the flesh, but it's the same word in Greek. And so this is another kind of interesting and tricky part of Bible translation, is that some Bible translations, instead of saying, put to death the deeds of the flesh, the translators will say, put to death the deeds of the sinful nature. Well, that's not technically word for word, but it is a thought of trying to explain what the translators think Paul meant when he used the word flesh. He meant put to death the deeds of the sinful human nature. And so doing a Bible translation can be difficult and tricky at times, and this is why it is so important that it be done in a team. Another very tricky part of Bible translation is bridging the cultural gap. Have you ever noticed that there are things when we read the Bible and we think, I don't know what this is talking about. I don't understand this. And it's because there is a lot of cultural distance between us and the first century world, or the world of 5,000, 6,000 years ago. It's a long time ago. It was in the Middle East. It was very different than 21st century America. And so this also can be very, very challenging for Bible translators. For example, Isaiah chapter 1, verse 18 says, though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be white as snow. Though they are red as crimson, they shall be like wool. Well, what if I'm a Bible translator in the middle of Africa and I'm translating the Bible to people that don't have snow? That's going to be a little bit of a challenge, cultural distance for them. Would it be legitimate to translate God has made my sins white as snow to God has made my sins white as yucca? And these are the kinds of challenges that translators face when they are out in areas where the Bible has never been translated in a particular language before. And so they have to ask these sorts of questions. These people can't relate to snow. How am I going to put it in a language that they can understand? Maybe they don't have the internet. I don't know. John 1:29 says, look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Well, what if a culture, this is a real example, I got this from a missions article, what if a culture doesn't know what a lamb is? It's not an animal that they use commonly in their culture. How are we going to communicate this word picture to them? These are the kinds of things that they wrestle with. Are we going to say instead of the Lamb of God, we're going to change it to the pig of God? Well, that kind of goes against the whole Jewish thing. Probably not going to work. But these are the kinds of questions that translators wrestle with at times. So the question here is, should Christian missionaries or pastors educate people about the meaning? Maybe I try to describe the snow, I try to describe the lamb to the people, but I keep the integrity of the words if from the translation, or do they recast the meaning into the reader's cultural understanding? This is a tension that many Bible translators face. Personally, I prefer the first option. I think that it would be better to educate people about something, but I understand that there are real challenges in this, and when the gospel is first going out to a particular people, we might have to make some concessions on that. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of a flavor for some of the issues that go into Bible translations. So why are there so many versions of the Bible? To go back to our first question, well, it's because the original text was written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, and these are no longer widely spoken, especially in our country, so we need a translation. Translations are necessary to make the Bible accessible to people who speak other languages. And we see this even in Jesus' time. The Old Testament in Jesus' time had been translated from Hebrew into Greek. And so when we read those quotes in the New Testament from the Old Testament, they are actually quoting the Greek translation of the Old Testament. So there's a long history of translating the Bible into the language of the people that they can understand. Do these translations or these versions all contradict? No. In most situations, English translations are perfectly adequate to understand the Bible. If you are a new Christian, if Christianity is completely new for you, I would recommend starting with a simpler translation. Maybe one of the thought for thought translations. That might be helpful. Because there's just a lot of stuff in the Bible, again, that's challenging for us to understand in our American context. That's understandable. A couple of translations to avoid would be the New World Translation, which is put out there by the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Watchtower Society. They're the ones that come to your door a lot, or they stand in airports now a lot. Or the Passion Translation. It's not a real translation. It's one guy's opinion of the Bible. So that's a good one to avoid. I want to take a quick time out from the presentation to talk to you really quick about Walking in Unity. Walking in Unity is the book that my ministry partner and I, Monique Dusson, just released recently. It is available through Harvest House. But we are also offering some discussion videos that go with the book. And these videos are available exclusively through the Center for Biblical Unity. Here's a quick preview.
Part of the reason that we embarked on writing this book, we saw such division in the church.
Racial reconciliation, hey, we should be for that. And it seemed benign, but then you break it open, you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's a bunch of things here that doesn't align with our Christian worldview.
People will quickly agree with us that race is a social construct, but they definitely want to keep it as part of their core identity.
We are already reconciled with God. Now we need to work out that reconciliation.
Racism is a heart issue. It is across the board, irrespective of where you come from in the world.
Prejudice plus power may have been true, but now the whole dynamic has shifted.
It's such a first world Christian conversation. You think about the church in hard countries. We're at risk of imprisonment or death for our faith.
Racial reconciliation automatically assumes there's a problem between me and you directly. Like, we've never had a problem together between us.
I think this is a moment for true Christians to actually shine.
Once again, I want to encourage you to check out our book, Walking in Unity, and you can see more about the discussion videos. Just head over to centerforbiblicalunity.com, click on Walking in Unity at the top of the website, and that will take you to the page where you can get connected to both the book and the discussion videos. And now, back to our presentation. Now, what about choosing a study Bible? You ever heard of study Bibles? Yeah, you go there to the store, and that's a whole other section of how do I make sense of what is happening here with all of these different types of study Bibles. The ESV study Bible, the archaeological study Bible, cultural backgrounds. It's a lot of different options. The word Life Application Bible. Well, what are all of these things? Okay, so once you pick a good translation, then you want to pick a study Bible potentially, okay? So a study Bible is really just a commentary that's super handy because it's in the same Bible. So it's a bunch of notes. So if you look in a Bible and you look at the bottom, you'll see some notes in tiny type. These are explanations of what's in the biblical text. And that's what we mean by a commentary or a study Bible. It's explaining it to you so that you can understand it. It's especially helpful if it's new for you. And so a study Bible is just a very conveniently located commentary. You just look right down. Now, a commentary or a study Bible is not inspired. It is not the same thing as the Bible itself. The Bible is our authority as Christians, but the notes in the Bible are not authoritative. Those are the work and the opinions of scholars. And so the notes are only as good as the scholars who wrote them, okay? So you have to keep that in mind. So when you're looking at the shelf in all of these different study Bibles, what you're looking at is, for example, in the Archaeological Study Bible, you're looking at notes that focus on the archaeology behind the Bible. So the small notes at the bottom of the page will focus on discoveries that have been made and historical evidences for the Bible. If you look at the Keyword Study Bible, they're going to focus the notes on key insights into the original languages. Okay, so different study Bibles have different focuses on how they're helping you learn what the Bible is about. Okay, study Bibles. The best study Bibles are those assembled by a team of interdenominational scholars. And this is what we see in, for example, the New International Version or the English Standard Version. And these, I think, are to be preferred over individuals where you're only getting one perspective, like the Schofield Bible or the John MacArthur Bible, which is really a lot of his sermon notes. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with appreciating the work of John MacArthur or Schofield, but if you want to get like the balanced view, what I like about the NIV is that if there's a controversial passage, they'll tell you there's 3 major views on this passage, and it'll explain each one. That's very helpful. I want to know that. Whereas if I'm getting a Bible that's only written by one individual, I'm only getting that one person's opinion about that passage. So I always recommend getting one that is written by a team. That's me. That's how it has, I find those to be the most helpful and what I always recommend to students. Teams tend to be able to work together to overcome individual bias. What to look for? Look for maps. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of maps. And many study Bibles are starting to eliminate maps. It makes me sad. But every time that there is a place that you read about in Scripture, take the time to go look it up on the map. We do this with our kids all the time of let's look on the map, because geography is a critical part of the biblical story. There are some things you cannot understand if you do not understand the geography. So getting one with maps. Get one with cross-references that'll tell you, like, this passage hooks to this other passage over here, and that it can help you get an insight of how these things are connected. Having charts to summarize key ideas can be really helpful, especially if you're working with young people or people who are newer to the faith. It really helps if you have some cultural background info in the study notes to help bridge that cultural gap and explain what's going on in the passage. And I think it's helpful to have multiple denominational viewpoints in the notes and kind of pulling out the best of those various traditions. So here's my bottom line recommendations. If you've been in church a while and you want to go deeper, I would recommend either the English Standard Version Study Bible or the NIV. Both of those are very solid, written by a good team of scholars. You're going to really benefit from the notes and the maps, the charts, all the things I've talked about. Those are really good. Our NIV study Bible for our family, I bought it for our family on our wedding day. And we still have that. It's still the Bible that we use every day in our family devotions. We've had it for almost 33 years, and it's an NIV study Bible. The notes are still solid, and helpful, and it has stood the test of time. Now, if you're just starting out and Christianity is new for you, I would recommend the New Living Translation or the Common English Bible, because these will help you, and you can get study Bibles in these translations as well, but these do a little bit more to help translate the original languages into thoughts and ideas and to try to explain it to those of us who are maybe new to the faith or new to going to church and we don't know all the insider lingo. These translations will help you along the way. Thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast. I hope you found it helpful and that you will share it with a friend. This is a great message to share with a new Christian or somebody who's coming back to the faith after being away for a while, because this is a very common question that comes up. And so it's a good one to share with someone who needs this kind of entry-level on-ramp to what can be a confusing topic. As we close out the year this year, I also want to thank each and every one of you who have donated to the Center for Biblical Unity this year to help support keeping Monique and I in full-time ministry. We really appreciate each and every one of you. And I would like to ask for your prayer and consideration as we head into the end of the year to remember the Center for Biblical Unity as one of your potential giving partners. We look at giving as your partnership with the Lord, and you're doing that through us, that it truly is a supernatural partnership. And if this ministry has blessed you, we want to encourage you to prayerfully consider supporting us. Doing ministry is not free. It is expensive. There are taxes, there insurance, there are raw costs of running the podcasts every week. And we try to keep all of those expenses as low as possible and be as frugal as possible. But there are costs involved, and we are moving into the end of the year in a shortfall in 2024. Giving has been down, but we understand that the economy has been poor and many people have been hesitant to give because times are tough, and we get that. As we're moving into the new year, we would really love to get our ledger to zero and go into the new year feeling like we are not going to have to make some very difficult decisions. It would just be wonderful to go into the new year with that clear ledger. So please prayerfully consider how you might partner with us. We would really appreciate that. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good week, and God bless.